All right, we're in 1 Samuel chapter 20, looking at verses 1 through 8. The first question reads, in the beginning of chapter 20, what was David's opinion of Saul's feelings towards him? In verse 1, he asks Jonathan, what have I done? What is my iniquity? And what is my sin before your father that he seeks my life? So he believes here that Saul was trying to kill him. Second question, how sure was David of this opinion? In verse 3, David says, but as truly as the Lord lives, and as your soul, Jonathan, lives, there is but a step between me and death. This is not a light feeling. He is confident of this, so much to the point that he swears by the life of God and by the life of Jonathan that this is the case. Third question, what was Jonathan's opinion? Verse 2, Jonathan responded to David, saying, God forbid, thou shalt not die. Behold, my father will do nothing, either great or small, but that he will show it me. And why should my father hide this thing from me? It is not so. So Jonathan feels that David is mistaken, that his father does not seek to kill him, that his father does not have these terrible ill feelings towards him. The next question, how did David propose to resolve this difference of opinion? This is in verse 5. David said to Jonathan, behold, tomorrow is the new moon, and I should not fail to sit with the king at meat. But let me go, that I may hide myself in the field until the third day at even. Verse 6, if your father at all miss me, then say, David earnestly asks leave of me, that he might run to Bethlehem. Going to verse 7, if he says thus, it is well, your servant shall have peace. But if he is angry, then be sure that evil is determined by him. He's testing Saul's feelings, going to create this environment to see whether or not Saul's feelings are hostile or if they are peaceful. And this is the means by which David seeks to resolve their difference, to allow Saul's feelings to be revealed. The next question, think of at least one other approach David could have taken instead of this one. I'll mention a few. David could have said, well, you feel that way, Jonathan. I feel this way. Let's just agree to disagree. I think he wants to kill me. You don't. That's fine. Let's just leave this alone. And let's just ignore this and try to continue our friendship with this disagreement remaining as is. That was an option. That's how David could have approached this and said, let's not rattle the boat and try to argue about this and try to change each other on this issue. Let's just stay how we each feel already and hold to our separate opinions. The other option that he had was he could have said, all right, let's argue about this. Saul has done many things that show that he wants to kill me. And this is why I believe that your father wants to kill me, Jonathan, because of X, because of Y, because of Z. And he could have listened to Jonathan, then present other alternative interpretations. Say, well, maybe that's how he felt then, but he's changed. And I know my father, and Jonathan would present his arguments. And they could argue about it just intellectually and say, because of this, I believe my opinion is true. And because of this, I believe your opinion is incorrect. And so that was another approach that could have possibly been taken. He could have just left it, as I said, or he could have argued about it. Rather, David took this approach in that he allowed his opinion to be tested. He allowed Jonathan's opinion to be tested as well. The last question, how can we apply this? Now, I do want to make sure that I'm not saying that this is the way we should approach every disagreement in every circumstance. But I believe there's some insights here in this story as to how we can possibly deal with disagreements and also how to be aware of the consequences of how we deal with a disagreement. We are human, and all of us daily encounter differences of opinions with other humans. How do we decide how we approach those differences of opinion? It's not wrong or right in all cases to do what David and Jonathan did here. But I want to highlight a very important point about what they did here. A very important point is that they were doing this on the basis of a very strong, trusting relationship. They loved each other. It says, David says he loved him more than the love of women. Jonathan says he loved him more than his own soul. They had a deep, intimate bond with each other. And so they trusted each other's intentions towards them. And so though this was a difference of opinion, they didn't see it as a difference of interest. They didn't see it as Jonathan just trying to pursue his own interest and secure his own future kingdom. That's not what David thought. That was not entering into it. So there was a trust there. And so that allowed for them to have an environment where disagreement was more healthy. And so that's one thing to note, that if they had a more hostile relationship or had less than the intimate relationship that they shared, it may have been wise for them to just leave that disagreement. You've probably been in a situation where you're on a plane or you're in a park or you're in some public place and you just talk to a stranger and somehow that stranger says something that you maybe strongly disagree with. Well, in that environment, you don't know the person, they don't trust your motives, they don't know you. It may be wise to just leave that difference of opinion. It may be more helpful to just say, okay, that's how you feel. I have my opinion on that, but let's not go into an argument over that. Let's not even try to test that, because that's not the trusting relationship that we see here with Jonathan and David. But on the other end of the spectrum, you have this kind of relationship, but within that, from stranger to the relationship between Jonathan and David, we have all of our relationships. We have friends, we have coworkers, we have family members, we have other people that we interact with, and we have to judge, is this relationship of a sort that it will be healthy to engage and try to work to come to an agreement on this difference of opinion, either pushing to let them understand and perhaps be persuaded to accept my opinion, or myself to listen to their opinion. And that brings to the next point about this. Notice that by the approach that David took, he subjected his own opinion to criticism. He subjected it to scrutiny. He has subjected it to possibly being wrong. He believed, as we stated, surely as God Almighty lives, he was sure that Saul had ill feelings towards him. However, he was willing to say, you know what, Jonathan, I'm going to allow for the fact that perhaps I'm wrong, and allow for the fact that perhaps you are right, and let's test to see the validity or invalidity of my opinion. And this is very important for all of us. We all have confident opinions. We have things that we are sure of, as sure as the Lord lives. But what we have to do is be willing to at least acknowledge the possibility that perhaps we are wrong. Perhaps this belief that we've held since childhood is not correct. And we need to be willing to at least allow for that, to allow for a testing of it. And the result of that, you see, when we do that, we have a fear. We fear that, well, if I allow for the possibility that I'm wrong, maybe I will be proven wrong. And we don't want to be proven wrong because we don't want to change an opinion that we've had from childhood. We don't want to change an opinion that we hold dear. We don't want to change an opinion of ourselves or of others or of our country or whatever it is. We don't want to change these opinions that we hold so dearly. So we aren't willing to admit the potential that they could be wrong. But the thing is, if they are right, and we allow for the possibility for them to be tested and possibly be wrong, then if they are right, then we have more and increased reason for having confidence in them. In this situation, David now has yet one more amount of evidence to add to the evidence he already had for believing his opinion. And so not coming out weaker, but even coming out stronger is the result when we're willing to admit the possibility of our opinion being incorrect and subjecting it to scrutiny, subjecting it to criticism. And that's what we see David demonstrating here, that he was humble enough to say, perhaps I'm wrong, and let's evaluate that. Fortunately, he ended up being right. But when we do that, we come out with more reason for believing our opinion. Lastly, I want to mention Jonathan. Jonathan, when proved incorrectly, we didn't include that in our verses, but when proved to be incorrect, Jonathan did not hesitate to acknowledge the incorrectness of his opinion. And that takes courage. That takes integrity. And I pray myself, I know I've struggled with that. I know when I've been in an argument, particularly about biblical topics, and someone seems to be proving me wrong and showing from the Bible that the opinion that I have is incorrect, I'm quick to cover or say or explain away and say, well, mine's still right if you look at it from this perspective, and still fight. But like Jonathan, we need to have the integrity. We need to have the honor, the moral strength to say, look, I'm wrong. Look, I'm wrong, and I'm willing to admit that you have a better and more correct understanding on this issue. So these are just some of the points, many other points that we can see in this story, in this experience, this disagreement between David and Jonathan, and hopefully these can be helpful as we work through the differences that we will encounter daily.